Alright, so we need to look at the next phase of Rome, stepping away from what it began. It started with a city inside of 7 hills on the Tiber River, going to a city-state under a Roman Republic. Now, the Roman Republic will stay intact as it moves to empire building. The Senate is going to be critical here because it's going to have a lot of influence not only in what the Caesar will do down the road, but also the emperor, and then the emperor is going to take away the power when we get to Augustus. But it's going to build in this gradual progression out of just a village of Latins and Etruscans to a city-state, and moving forward into an actual empire and the largest empire of its day. So let's see how empire building works for the Romans. First of all, it's going to last over 500 years. That's a significant amount of time for one empire in the ancient world to have this kind of control. Like most empires, it could have lasted longer. However, there's going to be faults at the end, which are going to cause major problems for the Romans. But it does last over 500 years. If you look at this map, you can see where Rome begins around the 490s BCE, before Common Era, in what is considered Latin Central Italy. Latin will be the language of the Romans. It'll be the common language across the entire empire. It doesn't matter where you are in the Roman Empire, you're going to learn how to speak Latin on top of your native tongue. But you can see on the map, it's not a very big area around this section of Italy, this section of Rome, and how it's going to grow tremendously. What's going to allow it to grow is its victory over its archenemy, the Carthaginians. The Carthaginians, if you look on this map, are located down here in northern Africa, and there's going to be a battle over the Mediterranean, essentially. You know, by this time, as the Romans are conquering and becoming stronger by 264, Greece is falling apart. So the Mediterranean is there for the taking, and the Romans will take over Greece, they'll take over Sicily. This will be the area of conflict between them and the Carthaginians, and the Punic Wars that will happen. There's going to be 3 Punic Wars that are going to occur. The first Punic War was a victory by Rome over the Carthaginian general Hamilcar Barca. The second Punic War is the most famous one because that's where the Carthaginian leader Hannibal marched elephants through the mountains coming in this direction around North Africa, across the Iberian Peninsula of Spain, down through Italy, and tried to have a sneak attack of Rome, and was successful to a degree. He didn't have the backup that the Romans would have, and he's going to be essentially defeated and sent back. And then the third Punic War was just a formality where the Romans will go and actually destroy Carthage. They'll burn it to the ground, and then they'll salt all the earth around Carthage so nothing can grow there anymore. And it kind of just asserts Roman dominance over that part of North Africa, takes all the area that was Carthaginian, and expands their empire. So Rome gets North Africa, and you can see on this map how much it's going to expand. This will be the Roman Empire in North Africa, and you can see here what is modern-day Turkey. We'll call it Anatolia for this purpose. You know, modern-day Israel, Judea, Syria, the areas of conflict today, the Mediterranean, the Iberian Peninsula, Spain, and Portugal, that's all going to be Roman. Okay? By 117 BCE, Rome is huge. It stretches from the Iberian Peninsula of Spain all the way to Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, and then it goes from northern Africa all the way up to the English Isles, up into Britain. And you guys are familiar with Hadrian's Wall that we built to stop the Brits, who are the tribes that are in that area. Now, the reason the Romans were so successful is they took a very big defensive approach. All right? What they felt was, if you're not on the defense, if you're not protecting yourself, you're going to get conquered. So they kind of flipped it around where if instead of defending, they actually went aggressive and attacked and took more, and that taking took away enemies, essentially. So you conquer and conquer and conquer until you don't have any more enemies to conquer, and then that land is yours. You know, when we get to World War II down the road, Mussolini's going to try to reenact that by creating a Roman Empire, conquering and conquering and conquering. Now, the Romans are much different than Mussolini, of course, because they are much more geared towards their government. But if they do take more, they don't have the enemies. Unfortunately, it's going to be their downfall because it's going to get so big where Rome cannot protect itself. The other important part of empire building for the Romans is it provides opportunity. The Romans are opportunistic types of people. They are different than the Greeks, a lot different than the Greeks, and here's why. Their army is so successful because they're taken care of. We're going to get into that here in the next slide, but it's an opportunity for just your average plebeian, your poor soldier, to go off and work and fight and make money for his family and gain land, which gets him more power and availability to farm and to live a comfortable lifestyle. and it encourages people to join or be a part. Even though the Romans were forced to join the army, this gave incentive, and that was a big draw for the Romans, and they knew if they were strong and well trained, they could conquer a lot of land, and the poor could really benefit from it. Plus, you had very ambitious leaders, and we'll talk about Julius Caesar here in a little bit, but these ambitious leaders wanted to gain more. They wanted to be remembered for what they did. You had emperors that wanted to be powerful, and the more land they controlled, the more powerful they were. So it really put them in a strong position to be motivated to conquer. All right, so let's look at the army. The army was very well built. They were well trained. They were very well fed, and they were very well rewarded. They had the best weapons. They had the best armor. They were extremely loyal to their generals. They were extremely loyal to Rome. They were proud of being like Romans. And again, here's another connection to the modern-day U.S., where our army is very well built because it needs to protect our country. The same thing happens here with the Romans. They're very well built because they need to protect Rome and also expand Rome. And because of the rewards, their incentives to be successful, it was worth it for them to fight and fight well. Here are a few pictures of Roman soldiers that you might have seen. You can see that they're heavily armored. They're in good shape. Their horses are heavily armored. They have weapons that are destructive and is successful in hand-to-hand combat and battle. And they fought as a unit. Those legions fought very well together. The other thing that was really important is, and this again, different than Greece, when the Romans took over, they were extremely generous to their former enemies. Again, it breaks down vulnerability. It takes away the enemies if they expand and conquer. And if you treat them well, they will fall into line. For example, they got citizenship. One of the big arguments and one of the reasons why Julius Caesar is going to be assassinated is because he wants to grant citizenship to every person that he conquers. And the Senate didn't necessarily want that, but he knew what was best. If you keep the conquered happy, they'll be on your side. And citizenship and rights and freedoms was huge for Caesar, and most authority figures knew this. The second thing, they were treated as allies. We take them in. You defeat them and you take them in. Again, very similar to the U.S. after World War II. Defeat the Germans, rebuild them, take them in. Defeat the Japanese, rebuild them, take them in. Treat them as allies. They're going to back you and protect you. And then lastly, it helps maintain local rule. The Romans will put generals in place or governors in place in certain provinces, and they had the local rule. You know, the emperor did not know what was going on in Judea. The emperor did not know what was going on in Britain. He had his local governors there to take care of it. They all followed Roman law. They all followed the Roman way of life, and they kept themselves intact. All right, a few lasting legacies. First off, you have great military leaders, and of course the most famous one is Julius Caesar. Now, Julius Caesar was part of the original triumvirate, this oligarchy that was created of consuls, 3 consuls, even though it should have been 2, where they had kind of control over Rome. And it was him, it was the General Pompey, and it was the General Crassus. And the 3 of them kind of had control over Rome. Of course, when you have 3 men who are powerful and wealthy and they want more power, they're going to go after each other. And Julius Caesar is going to gain that power and take over Rome. Now, he'll work with the Senate because he was part of the Senate. However, he's going to exceed his authority in the Senate's eyes and take over. And the people love Julius Caesar. That was a big part of why the Senate didn't like him. This aristocratic branch of the Senate was jealous of him to a degree because he had had so much success within the civil wars. He had granted citizenship to so many people. He was conquering. He was popular. He was likable. And they were jealous of that. And they had the opportunity to assassinate him. And that's when he was stabbed, according to Shakespeare, 23 times, but stabbed. But this idea of imperial control, the more land you get, the more power you get. And that's what Caesar was looking for. And during his time, he was extremely strong until his assassination. You have these fierce rivalries that bring civil war. Remember, civil war is conflict within your own country. There's this issue between moving towards empire building and an emperor going to that one leader idea, or keeping the idea of the republic. And the republic, again, the representative, the aristocratic branch of the Senate wanted power. Those 300 members of the Senate wanted power, but they were having to give it up because the emperors had more control. The legions were backing them. They were the ones who were out fighting. And in his case, like Julius Caesar, he's the general that's out fighting. Augustus is out fighting. We'll talk about him here in a second. But these men were gaining the loyalty of their people and not the Senate. So the rivalries between those who followed the Senate and those who followed the new leadership came into conflict. You know, you have this issue with the first triumvirate, Julius Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus. The second triumvirate, which is Octavian, Mark Antony, and Lepidus. And again, you have conflict between Mark Antony, who wants control, and Octavian Augustus, who wants control. And that's when Mark Antony brings the Egyptians into conflict with the Romans, and the Romans destroy the Egyptians, which ends the pharaohs and the Egyptian dynasties, the Ptolemy dynasties with Cleopatra. I mean, you have all these conflicts going on over power, and meanwhile, it's the people who are the ones being exploited at the bottom. So, because of Octavian's victory, Octavian Augustus, who was the adopted nephew of Julius Caesar, he actually adopted him as his child, but he was a nephew. Octavian is going to take over, and he's going to change the role of what the Roman leadership looks like, and he'll become an emperor, where all the power is within him. He calls himself Augustus Caesar, the exalted one, because he is going to be risen up on a higher pedestal than most other leaders had before. And even though he keeps the Senate intact, they are there just as a figurehead and not actually there to do any major real work. So, you know, here's Octavian. He's changing the mindset, and from here, they're going to go into what's called a Pax Romana, this Roman peace. So under these centuries after Augustus, this idea that for 2 whole centuries, Rome is without conflict. There's no really skirmishes or wars. They are the most powerful empire in Europe. And because of that, you're going to start to see this expansion of ideas. The building of aqueducts, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, to allow to bring fresh water into the cities. The spread of trade coming out of Asia along the Silk Road. You know, the most important part here, too, is this idea that new ideas are going to flourish and become successful, like the spread of Christianity, which we'll discuss in the next video. And then, of course, Roman power, the building of Roman roads, the protection of the seas by the Roman Navy, the protection of the roads by the Roman army. I mean, Rome is building and growing and building and growing. Hadrian's Wall to protect against the Brits. The gains that they're going to have during this Pax Romana are huge. So, and that all starts with Augustus. He kind of gets that going. And from there, emperors will look less at the Senate and move more towards their power, and you'll see Rome kind of take shape. Of course, it's going to fall apart when you have bad leadership, and we'll discuss that here in the next video.